We're going to finish our mini-series on Laban. But before we get into that, how many of you guys like experimenting? How many of you guys love experimentation? I remember when I was in chemistry class, all the time I broke so many things. I was such a bad quote unquote chemist. Like the teacher would say, put this liquid and this liquid together, and the color will be this, or it will give you a kind of scent, or it will produce this or that, and then I just broke everything. I mixed all the wrong stuff. I have the flasks broke, test tubes broke, and I learned the hard way, the expensive way, because I had to pay for them with my allowance. And I was in high school paying with my allowance. That was very painful. But I had to learn the hard way that sometimes certain causes have very, very bad effects because there's cause and effect. That's chemistry, right? And in life, we also know certain actions will lead to very, very good results. Certain actions will lead to very painful, very tragic, very bad, or very grievous results. And so today, the title of this sermon will be The Consequences of Carnality. This is the third of our mini-series on the character study on the life of Laban, and of course, connected with that is Jacob's life, Leah's life, and Rachel's life. All right, so just to remind you, the first of these is entitled The Examples of the Envious, followed by The Marks of the Manipulative, and today it's The Consequences of Carnality. So essentially, envy oftentimes leads to manipulation, and today we're going to see so many of the symptoms and the effects. And this might feel like a long sermon, but it's actually much of it is a recap. So just to recap everything, just so we remember, Jacob arrived, and Laban was there to kind of welcome him, and said, "Surely you are my kinsman." But we know that Laban is a master manipulator. He's even a better manipulator than Jacob, right? So Jacob said, "I'm gonna work 7 years," and Laban said, "That's cool, and in return you're gonna get Rachel." But after 7 years, instead of Rachel, Jacob married who? Leah. And then after that, he's like, "Oh, what's happening here? What have you done? What in the world is this? Why are you doing this to me?" And so Laban was like, finish the week, and then you're going to get Rachel as well, and then work for me for another 7 years. And so Jacob worked for 14 years. And then we talked about how, because he was married to Rachel and to Leah, the sisters slash daughters, or the wives, had a competition using trophy babies, right? So they tried to please their husband by producing heirs or children. And so we saw envy, we saw strife, we saw tension. So this was like a very, very dysfunctional, very toxic family dynamic. Then, of course, after that, Jacob finally decides, I'm going to leave. I can't handle this anymore. We're already done. And so what happened was, I'm done with work. I'm done with everything. He wants to leave. When he tried to leave, Laban said, "Don't do it. I'm profiting from you. I'm making so much income. Name your price." And so there was a scene when they were trying to out-manipulate one another, using the herds and using tactics on how to breed the sheep, right? With the striped versus and the black and the speckled sheep versus the really nice ones. So today will be the end of this mini-series. We'll start in Genesis 31, okay? 31 verse 17. And we'll just go through them. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his flock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Padan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he had intended to flee. So he fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days, and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. So we see here Jacob's old tactic, right? Remember before he manipulated or tricked Esau? The moment he got what he needed, he just left, he fled. Again, same thing here. He fled. All right, so it's get then go. So what happened here? Rachel stole the gods of her father. Now, let me just, when I read this, I laughed so hard. I honestly laughed. Because if you translate this to today, it sounds a lot like Rachel kidnapped the gods of her father. How how useless could those gods be that they can be kidnapped by people? Can you imagine for a moment you're talking to somebody and you're like, oh, where's your gods now? Have you prayed? Oh, I haven't prayed. Why haven't you prayed? I couldn't pray to my gods. Why? They got kidnapped. So it sounds very comical, right? So these are worthless gods. And just a side note on this, a lot of times, especially here in a Catholic country, we have so many statues. And people say, "Oh, I'm not worshiping those gods. They're not gods to me. They're just statues." The Bible already tells us. God already tells us, don't make these statues. Don't bow down to them. Don't pray to them. And people are saying, "I'm not praying to them. God knows my heart." And I would only say, yes, that's true. God knows your heart, and God also knows that you're using that as an excuse to continue to disobey Him. All right. So these are useless, worthless gods. But why did Rachel steal them? Why did Rachel kidnap the gods, all right, of her father? There are many possible reasons. Maybe Rachel still practiced paganism, or Rachel was going into a new land and she was probably scared or anxious, and so maybe she wanted some kind of a quote-unquote good luck charm. Those are possible, but there are more probable reasons. First, it is perhaps more probable that Rachel feared Laban using the gods to get guidance to pursue them. Because remember, Laban already said, I have found by divination that God has blessed me through you. And so this divination stuff, many of them actually work. All right, coming from a former New Age practitioner, a lot of them actually are accurate and a lot of them actually work. Of course, they're demonic and they're not biblical and they're very ungodly in their sin. But it doesn't mean they're not accurate. Okay, so maybe Rachel feared Laban pursuing them using guidance from his gods. This might also have been a form of quote-unquote revenge on her father for tricking Jacob, getting Leah into the picture, and then all this tension was all because of Laban's trickery and manipulation. This might also be because these gods had metallic value. I'm talking about silver or copper. There might have been precious stones there, which they may be able to sell in the future if they run into trouble. And lastly, remember that all the inheritance that they had, all the dowry that they had, was with Laban. And before, in those days, there was a culture that these gods, these are called the teraphim images, okay? Whoever held the teraphim images were usually the family patriarch. And whoever held these images would have a kind of legal claim on the family inheritance just in case there's a dispute, a legal dispute. So this might be Rachel trying to get, like in our day-to-day, you might want to think of it as a title to the land or a deed of sale. All right, so that's what the teraphim statues could have represented. So either way, no matter what reason Rachel had for stealing the gods of her father, we know a few things. We know that Rachel learned from her dad and her husband how to be a trickster. She learned the example from both her father and her husband. I'm going to read a few other verses to just give you some more affirmation about this principle or this truth. The Bible already tells us bad company corrupts good character. The New Testament repeats this. Paul says, do not be deceived, bad company ruins good morals. That's 1 Corinthians 15:33. Proverbs 13:20 says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Psalm 1 verse 1 says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. Meaning they don't do what sinful or pagan people do. Proverbs 22 verses 24 to 25 says this, make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. Now, obviously, we can replace anger with a man of envy, a man of pride, a man of whatever. Don't be friends with men or women who have these characteristics, because you're going to learn their ways and you're going to entangle yourself. You're going to learn what they do and you start doing it without even noticing it. 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers." That means you're in a relationship with them, and the relationship is in such a way that where they go, you go. Okay, that's what a yoke is. 2 Timothy 3, verse 2 to 5 says this, and this is quite long, but I'll read it. I'll read the whole thing. "For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God." And then he says, "Having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people." Which means it doesn't matter what label they have. Even if they say they're Christians, that they're bishops, that they're church planters, missionaries, elders, pastors, deacons, disciples, Bible study leaders, it doesn't matter. The Bible always tells us to look at the fruit and the life and not the position or label or title. All right? It's always the fruit and the life. Jesus said, "You will know them by their fruit," not you will know them by their position or title or label or whatever. All right? So we're learning, we see Rachel as a prime example because she lived her whole life with Laban, and now she's with Jacob, and now she's doing what they've done or what they've taught her. All right? Now look at this word kinsman. In verse 23, Laban took his kinsman with him and pursued Jacob 7 days. Now here's the irony of the word kinsman. Remember Laban when he first met Jacob? "Surely you are my kinsman." Right? He used that word. Name your wages. And again, when Jacob wanted to leave, he said again, "You are my kinsman. Name your wages." When he wanted to manipulate Jacob into into an employer-employee relationship, he said, you are my kinsman. Therefore, should you not work for me?" Right? So he uses that word to flatter, and yet here the Bible shows that he's using this word in a different way. He used kinsman as flattery, but he's also using kinsman as a threat. When he actually said, "Finish the week," and I keep repeating that because later on it's going to be revealed. He said, "Finish the week." What he's actually saying is, all the kinsmen are here, all my kinsmen are here. And if you disrespect Leah and me, we have legal right to kill you tonight. So you have to do what I say. All right? So he's using it as a kind of threat. And now he's using it as an actual pursuit to hurt, with the intention of hurting Jacob. And so we see again, just like last week and the week before this, that manipulators are inconsistent with their words and their actions. They use one word in 2 different or 3 different or maybe even 4 different ways to flatter, to manipulate, and then to threaten and to actually hurt. All right, so verse 23, if you really think about it, his intention was to kill Jacob. We're going to get to that in a bit. But envy usually oftentimes produces manipulation, and eventually you will see that the real emotion is hatred. And of course they caught up with Jacob because Jacob had, wives, women, children, herds, animals. So they were going slow. And Laban didn't have any of those, and so he could drive hard and drive fast. Okay, so they pursued and they caught up. Now, before they could actually meet, verse 24, "But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.'" In other words, don't harm him, can't do anything to him, can't hurt him. "And Laban overtook Jacob," verse 25. "Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, 'What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword?'" Okay? "Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? So if you think about it, both Laban and Jacob were sinful manipulators. The only difference between them is that Jacob had grace and Laban did not. If you really think about it, Laban was the better manipulator, right? He out manipulated Jacob all the time. If not for God's intervention, Laban would have won this game. All right. So if you think about it, what's happening here? Look at verse 26. Laban made some false accusations. He said, "Why did you take away my daughters like captives of the sword?" In fact, that never happened. It was the daughters and Jacob who were talking, remember? And then Jacob said, here's what happened, yada, yada, yada. And, Jacob kind of made up some false facts as well. And the daughters said, do what you want. We support you. We'll go with you. Right? So, essentially, they were both lying about one another. And so, when we really think about it, there's slander, there's false accusation. And this, don't forget, this is all in the hearing of the kinsmen. All right? So Laban was saying this out loud in the hearing of the other men. And of course, they have weapons with them. And so this is his way of trying to legitimize killing Jacob. It's like he's making parinig. He wants everyone to hear, you drove my daughters like captives of the sword. In other words, you kidnapped them, you stole my gods, you tricked me, and I wanted to have given you a party. And so he's trying to say all these things, making himself the victim so that the people listening would be offended for him. All right? He's trying to get legitimacy to kill Jacob. So when he says, with songs and tambourines and lyre, this is not for Jacob. Jacob knows the truth. Jacob knows that that's not real. So he's not saying this for the sake of Jacob hearing. He is saying this for the sake of the kinsmen to hear, so that he appears innocent in the eyes of the public. And that is one of the things we learned last week, right? The marks of the manipulative. They try to appear innocent to the public, except to the people they're trying to victimize. And then he says, it is in my power to do you harm. There's the real intention. Okay? The whole I wanted to give a party and, buy some lechon, that wasn't real. Alright? The real intention is, I want to hurt you. In fact, I can kill you. They're here with me, the fighting men, the kinsmen, to kill you. I wanted to have made good on my threat that first night when you got married. Finish the week or you die. Now, I have reason to kill you. If not for your God, you would have died. Alright? So now he's actually saying, I have the means, I have the right to kill you, but your God intervened. So, if you really think about it, sometimes it's difficult to spot this. Okay? One example of doing this in today, I took up law, and our professor, he was a prosecutor. He had a certain case that was very, very interesting. Person A had a grudge on person B. So what did person A do? He wanted to kill B, but he couldn't just kill B because that would be murder. So what did he do? He secretly annoyed Mr. B nonstop. He tried to provoke person B nonstop. They were neighbors, by the way. They were neighbors. So he would do things like he would leave garbage there. He would intentionally annoy person B all the time, nonstop. He was just waiting for B to finally confront him. When B finally confronted him, A provoked B even more, just so that B would strike first. And because B struck first, he was ready. He had a screwdriver with him, pretending he was fixing in the shed, and he stabbed B and B died. So he was trying to get out of it from a technicality or a technical point of view. Like it was self-defense. He struck first, and according to the law, the one who strikes first is the aggressor. And so he's saying, he's the aggressor. I was just defending myself. I just happened to have a screwdriver, so I stabbed him and he died. But actually, that was the plan all along. And he actually went to prison. My professor was a very good lawyer, so he got that out. All right? So that's what Laban was trying to do. He was trying to get off on a technicality. But Laban's real intention was to hurt, to harm, to manipulate, while appearing innocent the whole time. Now, if you think about it in verse 30, Laban also said, "Why did you take my gods? Why did you steal my gods?" Laban's real faith and real religion is his own pagan gods, and his real God is his greed. Of course, these gods have monetary value. This is also divination for him, or gave him some kind of guidance. His gods also gave him a claim on the inheritance. So this was everything valuable in his life. Look at the cause and effect. Laban manipulated everyone, every time, for all of his life, and suddenly, in one night, he lost almost everything. Genesis 31, verse 31. Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid. I thought you would take your daughters from me by force." So Jacob knew that Laban had this tendency to act violently by force. Verse 32, "Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen," so now Jacob is pointing to all the kinsmen, "point out what I have that is yours, and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Now let's look at it more deeply. First, one of the things that's very troubling to me is what Jacob said. "Anyone whom you find your gods shall not live." If you think about it, this means Jacob did not really have a high regard for human life. Because we know that, sheep will not steal gods, right? So it had to be a human person. And so Jacob is saying, whoever stole your gods, kill them. Doesn't matter which servant this is, doesn't matter if it was one of my favorite shepherds, one of the people who was very faithful to me, we'll kill him. There's a lack of value for life. This reminds me of a guy named Jephthah in Judges chapter 11, when he was going to fight the Ammonites. I don't know if you remember this. He was about to fight the Ammonites, and he said to the Lord, "Lord, I want victory. I want to win this war. Give me the victory. And the very first person that comes out of my tent, I'm going to burn as a burnt offering to you." And of course, in the end, what a tragic vow. The person who actually came out of the tent was his only child, a daughter. And so he had to kill his daughter because of that vow. And of course, God never asked for that. That was not something that honored God, but this was the time of the judges, and it was a very, very terrible time. That's for another sermon. But what am I saying? Jacob had a low regard for people, because again, manipulators will use people. They won't really value people. Jacob also made judgments without the full facts. He made hasty decisions out of impulse, and he threw out his words flippantly. And we do this a lot as well today. We're all very guilty of all of these things. Let me give you some 21st century examples. Have you ever seen a blog title? And just the title was kind of like clickbait, but because of the title, you judged the blog already. So you just saw a blog title and you judged. Did you read the whole article? Do you know this author? Have you read his other works? Have you read what other sources have to say about this blog? What about a sermon clip? You only hear 5 minutes from a sermon that was cut, and you make a judgment out of the preacher. Did you hear the whole sermon? Do you know about this preacher's actual theology and doctrine? Do you know what this preacher actually believes? Right? What about screenshots? People say, "Oh, I read this and that screenshots." Really? Out of screenshots, you made judgments. Have you heard audio recordings? Have you heard character witnesses? Have you heard personal experiences from people about their relationships with that person that you're judging? Or it's all based on screenshots? Church events. This church is holding an anniversary and would like to invite everyone, and there's going to be music. And people are like, "Oh, I'm going to judge them already." Or you hear that this church is doing a lecture on finances. Prosperity gospel. Do you make judgments right away? Do you actually know their intentions? Did you know the actual events? the actual things that happened, the actual proceedings of that event. I remember the strange fire. Oh no, not strange fire. Sorry, clouds without water, or snatch them from the flames. We had them here in Cebu, and several people said, "Oh, snatch them from the flames." Just in Peters, you know that event, they attacked and labeled and just bashed all the Pentecostals, and I was like, "Bro, did you hear? Did you listen?" I didn't listen to any. Not even 5 minutes. I didn't listen to anything at all. I already know. Well, you should have listened first, because I didn't hear a single bash. I didn't hear a single attack. They were all presenting arguments and discussions. All right? Lastly, infographics, especially when it comes to politics, right? Do you fact check? Do you go to Snopes.com? Do you Google if it's a hoax or not? Or do we make judgments? You see, we can be guilty of this even up to today. At the end of the day, there are two kinds of kinsmen. There are two kinds, the objective kinsman and the carnal kinsman. The objective kinsman gets content and context before concluding. Okay? They get the full content, they get the full context, and then they conclude. So they try to hear everything, all sources, all sides. They Google, they do their own research, and all of that stuff. The carnal kinsmen don't care about objectivity. Deep down, these people are actually already carnal. And they want to express their carnality, and they simply are waiting for a technical justification to behave carnally. So I'll give you an example. If I'm a carnal Christian, carnal kinsman, even if I call myself Christian, doesn't matter. If I'm a carnal kinsman, I'll say, I want to be objective, but then actually I'm prideful. I want to talk people down. I want to talk down about stuff, about people, about churches. I just want to lambast. And so I just hear a little bit, yeah, I know that guy, yeah. I know that church, yeah. Oh, this writer, this preacher, yeah. But actually, I never did any research. I never was objective. I just wanted a punching bag. I just wanted a technical excuse to bring out my pride while pretending to be godly. And those are the two kinds of kinsmen. The heart has already all these negative things, pride, anger, envy, etc. And so these people jump at the first opportunity to attack, gossip, slander, conclude the worst about others so that they feel better about themselves. And isn't that the case when it comes to pride? Pride causes us to make false, wrong conclusions about others to justify false, wrong conclusions about ourselves. I'll say that again. Pride causes us to make false, wrong conclusions about others to justify false, wrong conclusions about ourselves. And if we think about it, if not for grace, Rachel may have really died. Because this was something that Jacob declared in front of all the kinsmen. The stealing of the gods is a very, very big deal. Imagine the stealing of the gods could be akin today to someone stealing a big statue from a Catholic church. Okay, it's that big of a deal. So Rachel could have been in really, really big trouble here. And Rachel had become just as good as a liar as her father and husband by pretending, Dad, I want to stand. I want to honor you, Dad, but I have my period, so I'm just going to sit here. But actually, she was sitting on the gods. And the saddle of the camel is like a big, thick cloth that you wrap. So the gods were inside. So she learned the ways of her father and her husband. Verse 36. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all of your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts, I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by the day by day the heat consumed me, and by the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock." So that's 20 years. "And you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. So, what's happening here? First, Jacob never admitted to revenge manipulation. He never admitted to trying to out-manipulate Laban through the breeding process. He was only doing what in Bisaya we call namuybui. It's kind of like you're being an accountant. You're counting all the good stuff you've done. You're looking at your past credentials, and all these things, trying to kind of get the upper hand in an argument. This can be like a case-to-case basis, whether it's legit or not, right? Now, Paul does something similar, but in a different way. If you think about it, Paul talks about all the good he has done as well. But remember two things. Number one, Paul was blameless, and number two, Paul was appealing. He was blameless, and he brought all of that up to appeal to his people. Jacob, on the other hand, was not blameless. He was also guilty of the same things, so he was being hypocritical, and he did not do this to appeal. He did this to berate, to attack, to win an argument, to put himself as better. Okay? Now, if you think about it as well, Jacob did something that's also very, very questionable. When he said, "What was eaten by wild animals, what was torn by wild animals, I did not bring to you." Let me explain what that means. In shepherding rules, if let's say, so Laban was the owner, and Jacob was what you call the under shepherd. Okay, so he was watching the flocks of Laban. Normally, here's what happens: if a lion eats a sheep, Jacob should not just be quiet. He should take the carcass or whatever was left, right? Like he would look for the remains. Maybe there's a foot, a leg, or the head was cut off or whatever. And he would bring the carcass to Laban. And Laban would inspect it. Okay, there's really scratch marks. That looks like a bite mark. Yeah, it was eaten by a lion. So Jacob had to go to Laban to prove it's not my fault. It really wasn't my fault. And there are times that it would be Laban who would shoulder the cost of that sheep that was torn by wild animals. So Jacob should have brought the torn animals. But instead he said, "I did not bring them to you. I bore the loss myself." The truth is, he should have brought it up. You're not supposed to make these extra sacrifices and then in the heat of an argument, bring them up and then use them to win the upper hand. That's very manipulative. Laban could have said, "I never asked you to not bring them up. You should have brought it up to me so I could have inspected them. I could have borne the loss. Don't you bear the loss without telling me, and then you're going to use that against me." That's an unfair thing that you're doing. I didn't even know you were doing these things. All right, so Jacob was also doing things to outmaneuver and outmanipulate Laban, even until now, from before. Verse 42, Jacob now uses God's dealings as part of the beratement. If you think about it, does Jesus, Paul, Peter, James, John, or Jude ever in the whole New Testament use "God's on my side" to kind of get people to do things? All right? When Paul says, "I am an apostle," he doesn't say, "I'm an apostle. Don't you see everything I've done? You got to do this now." Of course not. He never said, "Did God ever talk to you the way God talked to me? Did God convert you the way He converted me?" Nope. Not a single apostle, not a single Bible writer, not a single good example in the New Testament will have this. But Jacob does it. He's saying, "God's on my side. God did this. If not for God, you would have done this to me. You're so evil, but God's on my side." That's, again, a manipulative tactic. It's very as similar as, the Lord told me, or the Lord spoke to me, or I dreamt this and that. It's very manipulative. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to use that. If you look at the New Testament, these blameless people, number one, they were blameless. Number two, they either appealed to divine authority or they appealed to their integrity and to their blamelessness. Jacob was not blameless. He did not have integrity in many areas of his life, and yet he still uses this attack to berate. Not to appeal, but to berate. All right? And how interesting, he says this, in the eyes of the kinsmen, in front of all the kinsmen, they were both like, Laban was like, why did you do this to me? I was innocent. I wanted to give you a party. And then Jacob was like, well, I'm innocent too. Look what God has done for me, and God's on my side, and look what I did. So they were both trying to one-up each other in terms of their works. I did this. No, I did this. I did more. I did more. Didn't you do Bible study? Yeah, but I planted a church. But I planted a church abroad. Well, I planted 4 churches abroad. In Tagalog, it's pataasan ng ihi. All right, so this isn't in America. They say this is not a peeing competition. All right, so but here's the truth. If you really think about it, between the two of them, Laban was the better manipulator. But when you think of Laban to Jacob, you know what Laban was to Jacob? Laban was simply a mirror to Jacob. Laban exposed to Jacob what Jacob was truly guilty of himself. Verse 43, finally Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have born? So he's trying to get sympathy again, and it's not really true. The daughters are his daughters, yes, but they're also Jacob's wives, who he worked for 14 years, and one of them he got out of trickery. The children are his children? No, the grandkids are grandkids, not direct children. The flocks are technically, legitimately Jacob's, and he tried to steal from Jacob in the first place. He was trying to steal sheep and goat. So he was lying just to get more sympathy, again in the public hearing of all the kinsmen. So what did he say? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar, and Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. So basically, when you say eat there, that means they had to sacrifice a goat or a lamb. They had to kill as a covenant sacrifice, so that the two of them would have a covenant together. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galid. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore he named it Galid and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. So of course, Laban was trying to lie to gain sympathy. This was to make sure that all the kinsmen heard what he was saying. But there's a little bit of tidbit here. What is this Mizpah covenant? The Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. I googled Mizpah, and the first thing that came out was on Amazon. There's this little locket, like a heart pendant for a necklace, right? So a heart, and then you can put it apart, and then it says here Mizpah, and then here it says, may the Lord watch between you and me, and here it says, while we are out of one another's sight. It sounds so romantic for long-distance relationships, but that's so ironic, because this covenant was not made out of romance. It was born out of mistrust, animosity, antagonism, and anger. All right? This is not Laban saying, while we are far from each other's sight, I'm going to miss you. That's not what he meant. What he really meant was, I don't trust you as far as I can throw you. I have zero trust. So if you do something while I'm away, God's watching. Okay, that's the heart. All right, so verse 50. What is the content? Okay, so content of the covenant. Look at verse 50. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob even more, see this heap and this pillar, the one that they built, which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. Now look at the hypocrisy. It was Laban who wanted to harm Jacob, and now he's saying, don't pass here to harm me, as if he's the one who's a victim. Okay, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Notice there's no Laban also hugged Jacob, said farewell to Jacob. None of that. Can you picture it? It's like, oh, my daughters, oh, my grandkids. And then Jacob's are like, You know, like, there's like probably that kind of, Then Laban departed and returned home. So all of this has public witness. Does Laban truly care about his daughters? Well, let's see. Laban used his daughters to manipulate. Laban spent all their dowry on himself, which means he doesn't really care about his daughters. And the dowry was supposedly something he kept just in case Jacob died. Then there's insurance. There's like life insurance for his daughters. That's what the dowry is for during their day. It's life insurance for potential widows if a woman became a widow. Now, what does he say? He says, don't take wives beyond Leah and Rachel. Why is this part of his covenant? Basically, he wants to keep the inheritance intact, just in case Jacob dies and the daughters return. So if Jacob dies in the future and the daughters return, the inheritance is not going to be spread out with other families. It's going to be all his, back to him again. Okay? And he also says, don't cross over. I won't cross over there. You won't cross over here. Why? If you really think about it, number one, Laban doesn't trust Jacob. But more than that, Laban knows that Abraham/Isaac was very rich, very powerful, had a lot of people. So he wanted to avoid a potential fight or a war. He's saying, in Laban's mind, Jacob, if you're going to go home, you're probably going to tell Isaac, you're very rich, very powerful, very feared family over there, what I've done. So you might want to take revenge on me, and I don't want that because I know I might lose, okay, because you've got your gods, which is obviously very powerful, and you've got your family pagyud, so I'm at a disadvantage. So just make a covenant that you're not going to come here to harm me, okay? Just forget I was trying to harm you. Just don't harm me now, all right? Also, Jacob cannot return to use the teraphim statues for any kind of legal claim on the inheritance. So he's also technically saying, if you cross this line, if you made a covenant with your God, and you come back here, I now have technically legal right to kill you because you're breaking covenant. If you come here, it means you're trying to harm me, so I can kill you now. His intention never disappeared. But he's very good with technicalities. He's very smart. He's master manipulator. He won the award, father-in-law of the century. Okay? So if you really think about it in this 3 past mini-series, just to summarize everything, first we learned about envy. We see that all the way from Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob finally comes to and meets Laban, and we see envy, we see manipulation, and today we see the consequences. We have learned lessons from Jacob, from Laban, from Leah, from Rachel. So how do we summarize the entire mini-series, not just this sermon, but the whole mini-series? Okay? The root is envy. The root is covetousness. If you think of the 10 commandments, you've got don't have any other gods besides me, number 1. And number 10 would be don't covet. Why is it that the last is don't covet? That's a heart issue. Everything else in between is an action. Don't lie, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't kill, right? Honor the Sabbath. These are all actions, and then at the very end, it's heart. Commandment 1, heart. Commandment 10, heart. Because covetousness is actually pride. Covetousness is pride. Envy is pride. The root of envy is pride. The Bible again says that this is evil, this is demonic. Remember James? James describes this as evil and demonic. Envy breeds resentment, anger, cruelty, unsatisfaction, and in the end, it produces ruthlessness. What are the symptoms of envy? Just to do an overview for the whole mini-series. Symptoms of envy include overly ambitious, quarrelsome, competitive attitude, put others down always, and always something to prove. The truth is, Laban envied Jacob. That's very obvious. Laban envied Jacob. The sisters envied one another, obviously. There's actually a sermon on YouTube. You can search it. Just search Diotrephes space a portrait of pride. Just search that on YouTube. It's a very good sermon. It's very much related to this. And envy often leads to manipulation. Not always, but very, very, very often it leads to manipulation. People who are envious will learn how to manipulate eventually. What are the 10 marks of the manipulative, and we'll give you 4 extra today. And so I'm going to give you the mark, and then I'm going to give you an example from today's sermon. So mark number 1, they will use religion to get and go. Remember Jacob? God is on my side. He uses religion. 2, lip service to butter you up, and when you're useless, they'll kick you out. Lip service, Laban. I wanted to give you a party. You're my kinsman. Okay. Number 3, they're preoccupied with schemes and strategies. If you think about it, these are the terms of the Mizpah covenant. The don't cross here, all of that stuff. They're itching for a piece of God's pie. Laban said, why did you steal my gods? Right? All worship should go to God. He has his own gods. Number 5, they audaciously proclaim their innocence or honesty. They don't self-examine for themselves. They don't know all the facts. They don't look at themselves, their heart, or the people they're responsible for. Basta ako, I'm innocent. Jacob, kill the thief, whoever it is. Okay. Number 6, they're inconsistent with their words and their actions. And we see that in Rachel. I have my period. I don't want to get up. But actually, she was lying. And again, the word kinsman, we see that. Number 7, they rely on technicality. This is, obviously Laban during in the hearing of all the kinsmen. Why did you kidnap my daughters like captives of the sword? And, these are mine. All of those things. Number 8, they appear innocent to the public, but except to the person that they're trying to victimize. But to everyone else, they try to look innocent. I would have wanted a party with you with lyres and tambourines and etc. Number 9, the end justifies the means. This is all of Laban's actions put together. Number 10, they mix truth with lies. Laban said the daughters are mine, but actually no, they're Jacob's wives. He said the children are mine. Actually no, those are Jacob's. Right? Now there are 4 more. Number 11, they use slander. Right? They use false accusations that are not real, obviously because they're false. Captives of the sword. Actually no, the daughters agreed with Jacob that they wanted to leave. Number 12, they lie to gain sympathy. Okay, we've seen that in Laban towards the kinsmen. They make hasty conclusions, kill the thief. And number 14, they're very critical and they use beratement, and at the same time they use their own personal credit. So they are critical of others and then they put others down while trying to put themselves up. You did this, which are all wrong. I did this, which is better. Or you may have done some good stuff, but I did better stuff. I did more stuff. I did this. I did that. What are the consequences of carnality, of pride, of envy, and of manipulation? First, you will behave carnally, which will prove to yourself and to the world that you are not saved. It is very dangerous because you are going to hell. If you continue on this path, you will have just proved that you were never saved in the first place. Doesn't matter what you call yourself. People will be known by their fruits. Your profession of faith, your religion is not what matters. It is your holiness, your purity, and your faithfulness. All right. In my 18 years as a Christian, I have lost count of how many people I have met who claim to be Christians and yet have the most questionable lives. Second consequence, others will learn your ways and they will stumble. People who claim to love the Lord will learn your ways and you will be their stumbling block. And I always fear what Jesus said, that it's better that you shouldn't cause others to stumble. Like, it's better if you get a millstone and wrap it around your neck and you're thrown into the middle of the ocean. If you know what it's like to go down so fast that you've got pressure building up your ears so your eardrums will pop, that's it's like torture, and then you're suffocating to death. Like, that's better than causing others to stumble. All right? So people will learn your ways, like Rachel learned from her father and her husband. Number 3, you're going to risk those who love you and those who you love. And this can be life and death. If you think about it, envy, if you think of envy and Joseph's brothers, because Joseph's brothers envied him, they wanted to kill Joseph. They wanted to, and here, because of envy, the sisters were so cut-necked, against one another. Laban tried to hurt, so you're going to risk those you love and those who love you. Number 4, you're going to have broken relationships, and you're going to have what we call EOF, end of friendship. You're going to break relationships, you're going to lose friendships, And many times, these are the best blessings in your life because these are people who love you the most, care for you the most, pray for you the most, sincerely want the best for you. And then, because of your own envy and your own idols in your life, you're going to lose those blessings in your life. And number five, lastly, self deception. You will be blind to your own pride, you will believe your own lies. I don't know if Laban actually believed that he said, when he said, all you see, the sheep are mine. I don't know if he knew he was lying or he was so self-deceived that he actually believed what he was saying, that the sheep was really his. Sometimes you say a lie so many times, you end up believing it. And I don't know if that's what happened to Laban. So what are our lessons from here? Number one, avoid such people. I've read to you 2 Timothy 3 verses 2 to 5. Paul says, avoid such people. The Bible clearly, it's a command. It's not a suggestion. It's not a request. All right? It's a command. So if you see it in others, if people you trust, people you know have warned you about them, then be vigilant. And if you see it, immediately just avoid them. Secondly, you have to self-examine yourself. You have to ask God, Lord, open my eyes, open my heart, open my spiritual eyes to see if there's any kind of envy, pride, covetousness in me, and help me to repent, oh God. And the third one is very interesting. If you think about it, Jacob and Laban had hatred and anger and animosity, and they were enemies. Essentially, they were enemies. They pretended to be civil, but they were enemies. It's kind of like religious people. I don't hate God. I love God, but actually living double lives, sinning, rebelling nonstop. So what we see between Jacob and Laban, enemies but pretending to be okay. That's what non-believers have. The relationship between non-believers and God. They will never say, I hate God. Well, a lot of people do. But most people will not say, I hate God. They'll say, I respect God. I respect religion. I respect theism. But they're enemies of God. And what we see here, the covenant of Mizpah, is a very, I'd like to say the word poor, it's a very poor foreshadowing of the gospel, that an innocent lamb had to die to broker peace between enemies. And God and sinful, rebellious humans, the relationship there is that of enemies. Okay, not everyone is a child of God. The Bible says that only those who repent of their sins and believe in Jesus Christ become children of God. So either we are children of God or we are enemies of God. It's either or. There's no neutral ground here. Okay, and just as an animal had to die so that Jacob and Laban would finally have a sort of peace. They were not reconciled, but finally there was a kind of peace. We see in the New Testament that Jesus is the Lamb of God who died so that not only will we have a semblance of peace, but we will have real, reconciled peace between God and man. God is if Laban was sort of fearful that Jacob might return and bring an army from Isaac, God's army, well, God doesn't even need an army. With a snap of a finger, He can punish all of us into hell. Okay? With a snap of a finger, with just a thought, God can do it. With a blast of His word. We are the people who should be worried. And if Laban said, don't come here to do me harm, this animal died so that you cannot do me harm. Jesus goes to the cross willingly, and says, I die on the cross so that not only will God the Father not do you harm, but God the Father would take you in, accept you, love you, adopt you as a child of God, and there's real reconciliation, real peace, and there's going to be eternal rejoicing in the life after this. So if you really think about it as dysfunctional, reading this, this is the most dysfunctional family I've ever seen. Well, during the series. Between God and us, we are the dysfunctional, rebellious sinners. And it is by grace that God sends Christ to die on the cross for our sins. And so if there's one thing that I'd hope that you take from this mini sermon series, is that this is what the gospel is.
it is bringing sinners to God in a reconciliation or in a reconciled relationship. So I hope that this mini series has been a blessing to you guys. I know that it's been very, very heavy these past few sermons because of the text, but we're here. It is what it is. We're here because we're here. And it is by the sovereignty of God. So God bless you guys, and let's pray.